I am eternally optimistic until the cold hard reality of life slaps you in the face like putting your brake down on your Razor scooter as you're going down the hill. And that's what this video is about. It's about Everquest 3 and my concerns about the game as I have watched and heard and listened for over a year. And all we have heard in that year is all. I'm officially concerned for Everquest 3, the fabled Everquest 3, the game that started with rumors from hirings, was even the target dates on funding goals and investor documents, and soft confirmed in PAX panels and in an interview with MinMax. But all this silence for over a year has got me concerned, along with some other things. My anxiety over this year has continued to tick up and up and up. And I want to talk to you about it. I want to share in this concern and misery, potential misery, and hope that by putting this video out there, we get some surprise, thing that shocks everyone and it gets announced tomorrow and this video is useless. But let's talk about it. Number one is going to be, of course, silence. 2025 was the year work was supposed to begin on Everquest 3, or investment rather. At least based on the singular financial quarter document that we have. The little slide people like myself have clung to. Start of investment 2025, target release date 2028, $30 million plus in cost, massively multiplayer fantasy mmorpg. That was all the way back in 2023 when we got that. I went into 2025 hoping we'd get some kind of confirmations, even in the financials, which are the least glamorous way to look at these things and make me feel gross just picking through them like I'm suddenly going to contract some sort of capitalism related virus. But quarter after quarter, we got nothing except one giant glowing red flag. And sometimes that nothing was pretty glaring. Like leaving off Everquest even from other things, like talking about how well Lord of the Rings Online was doing, but leaving off Everquest, not talking about it, not talking about the game's future, not talking about the IP's future. In the early days of these financials, Everquest was talked about as this amazing IP, this world-class, this global-class IP that had a whole lot behind it. And yet, that doesn't seem to be the way it's talked about anymore. It seems to kind of be there, but not with the same kind of fervor that was there in the past. And I'm hoping that this is just kind of temporary and it's not a big thing, but I do feel like this lack of oomph around Everquest in the financial documents, it's a little scary to me as a fan of Everquest and someone who wants to see this Everquest 3 remake. But what's that red flag? What is the red flag? And it's not that. Red flag is actually another freaking game. It's a game that EG7 bought, that Daybreak bought. Palia. For a while, one of the things that kept my hopes up about Everquest was that for EG7, Daybreak was ostensibly doing very well for them, and that was headlined by Everquest and Lord of the Rings Online. This was the case even as recently as the end of 2024 with successive great reports for them. Enter a rough 2025 for Everquest, which saw multiple bad reports, especially toward the end of the year, and no mention of any future IP plans. No spin-offs and certainly no Everquest 3. But they did have glowing reviews of their latest MMO acquisition, Palia. Not only did Palia launch on console, but it's listed as one of the primary drivers for revenue growth for Daybreak to end the year, and in the looking ahead section, Palia gets its own section marking its upcoming annual expansion in the spring. Everything else in Daybreak gets kind of like shoved together in one place, and Palia gets like highlighted, like look how good Palia's doing. There's something about that, something about how much they're highlighting Palia, their new cozy MMO, and how well it's doing. For a while I thought when they had purchased Palia, this is an opportunity there for them to pull in this team, for them to pull in a new game in Palia and maybe use that as a springboard for a new EverQuest type game. But now I'm wondering, are they looking at what they're making with Palia and seeing the grass is greener over here and thinking there's a lot more return on investment, which feels gross to say, in Palia than in a new EverQuest or in the other concern that I've had, and the concern that I've had for years, 2 years at this point. The fact that they canceled the Lord of the Rings Online remaster. And that is our third issue. When the Lord of the Rings Online remaster was greenlit, I honestly had some mixed feelings. At first, I wondered if this meant limited resources would be siphoned from EverQuest and EverQuest 2 to this project. But that also made me excited because it showed that the new owners of these MMOs, EG7, wasn't content just to sit back and reel in money from these legacy games which are cheap to maintain and still pull in sizable incomes. Games that continue to pump out annual expansions, have optional or in some cases damn near mandatory subscriptions, progression type servers to cycle players through, and in-game shops. They are highly monetized, well-oiled machines, and there really isn't much need for them to remaster or remake them when they're actively bringing in money. And yet here they were remastering Lord of the Rings Online and working on a UI revamp, except they canceled them. After announcing it, they said, you know, it's not worth it. It's not worth the money. Specifically, it's not worth the return on investment, which I guess could be a very short-sighted thing given the fact that at the time when they made that choice, Amazon was still making a Lord of the Rings MMO, and as we know, that shit's not happening anymore. So, cool. That's worked out great for them now, making that choice to not make that remaster. Fuck hell. But the thing is, if EG7 didn't see the point in remastering Lord of the Rings Online, a newer MMO with a bigger IP than EverQuest, it makes me wonder about the desire to do a remake of EverQuest 1. Now the big variable here is that they do own the IP of EverQuest 1, whereas the licensing of Lord of the Rings is incredibly convoluted and probably getting even worse with Paramount gobbling up Warner Brothers in an attempt to own literally everything now from TikTok and your news to Frodo's socks. Not to mention that it gets even worse with Embracer Group also owning parts of Lord of the Rings, as well as Amazon owning parts of Lord of the Rings, so really there's a whole lot of just convolutedness with the IP. And the fact that yes, Lord of the Rings Online still has licensing with Lord of the Rings for their game. So yeah, it's a lot of craziness when it comes to that license and licensing fees and everything like that. Whereas EverQuest is just EverQuest. It's owned by Daybreak. It's owned by EG7. The only thing that's complicated that I can think of, at least from my point of view with like EverQuest and their whole IP situation, is the remakes of like Champions of Norrath 1 and 2, because technically the studios that made those games no longer exist. So the whole like licensing and IPs to like do remakes of those would be more difficult than say just doing a remake of EverQuest 1, the actual MMORPG. But this canceled Lord of the Rings Online remaster has just been like sitting there lurking in the back of my head like freaking Gollum for 2 years, and it's just it's worried me that they would be willing to announce something like that, start, and then pull back. Now I'm gonna give you a fourth bonus reason for my anxiety and concern over the EverQuest 3 MMO here, and that's just the industry. The industry feels truly in a bad state right now, not just MMOs, gaming in general. Consolidation has led to the closure of legendary studios, the blind rush for AI to make as much slop as possible to the point where we're totally not supposed to call it slop because that'll hurt CEOs' feelings, have culled MMO projects and lost decades upon decades of industry experience. Investment in MMOs is drying up even more than it had been before. It feels like we've been in a nadir and we're still in it, and this valley, this long valley, is just getting deeper and deeper, and I can't yet see the end of it. We're in a lean moment that maybe back when Everquest 3 was brought up, it might not have been foreseen how long this would go. I think for many, myself included, there was this thought that we'd come around this lengthy corner, especially post-COVID with all the industry layoffs, and find some good news, and instead we're being slammed in the face with even more dire conditions for the genre and the industry we love, and that freaking sucks. But because this whole video is so freaking negative, I want to end with maybe a little bit of forced silver lining. And that forced silver lining is that if you're sitting back and you're saying, well, okay, if I had EverQuest, if I had the EverQuest IP, and I don't have a real need or reason to remake the game because it's just chugging along, but then you're starting to see a dip, you're starting to see it go down a little bit. Maybe that is the impetus that you need to actually consider putting in the work necessary to revitalize, to bring back, to kind of make it work. And then at the same time, you have their example of an MMO that is currently new in Palia, that is bringing in money, that is bringing in new people and is actually working. So you have a good example of a new MMO that's working for your company, and then you have an ancient MMO that is kind of potentially maybe reaching the end of its lifespan and needs to be revitalized. That's at least my hope of the silver lining here, that maybe that's where their heads are at. I don't know, maybe I'm just, grasping at straws here. But let me know what you think. I'm sure the comment section is gonna be pretty negative, but at the end of the day, this is where we're at. This is all just speculation. I don't have any additional news. I'm just speculating based off what I've been watching, because I've been watching these damn quarterly reports from EG7 for like 4 years, and I don't ever want to look at quarterly reports ever again. My name is Red Flynn. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day. If you want a little bit of brightness or excitement, these are all the MMOs I'm still excited about that I'm fairly certain are still coming out. I say that now, I already had to take one of them off the list. You know which one I had to take off. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have an absolutely wonderful day. Bye, everybody.